I'm a creature hunter, one of the few still active today. Being a hunter is a lonely profession, which often takes us to the most remote places on the planet. The rewards are high, but the risks are even greater. Few risk facing the challenges of this life, and even fewer are content with smaller hunts. When monster season arrives, there is no rest, but in the intervals I accept less intense cases. However, this mission would be different from all the others. As a freelancer, my reputation grew over the years, and my colleagues started calling me the Wanderer. I don't care about nicknames. What matters is to return home alive. And I know that's what you want to hear, so let's get straight to the point. This story is the most recent and without a doubt the one that challenged me the most. It all started like any other day. I woke up early, followed my routine, and while having my coffee with eggs and bacon at my favorite place, I received a call. A simple case: missing persons. A group of 4 friends had gone camping in the forests of Alaska and did not return after the agreed time. 2 days passed, and with no news, the authorities sprang into action. The last time they saw them was at night. With the Wendigo season about to begin, I already had an idea of what could have happened. I accepted the job immediately. It wouldn't need much equipment after all. It would just be a routine hunt. But as always, I prefer to be prepared. My kit includes sturdy gloves, a sacred wooden cross, a crossbow with special arrows, a 9mm pistol with silver bullets, and 2 extra magazines, as well as some groceries. This time, however, I took a flamethrower, as Wendigos and other creatures have a deadly aversion to fire. Holy wood and silver bullets work against almost any threat, but fire is always an extra guarantee. Something that few know about the Wendigos is that their behavior varies according to the region. In the south, they are lonely, camouflaged in the night, imitating human voices as a psychological strategy. But in the north, as in Alaska and Canada, they hunt in groups, using the environment to their advantage and attacking with merciless ferocity. This knowledge is crucial when dealing with these creatures. Upon arriving in Anchorage, I was greeted by a man with a thick Russian accent. He seemed genuinely concerned about his daughter and her friends, but his eyes indicated that he knew more than he was willing to say. His hesitation at the mention of a Wendigo bothered me. "I don't know," he mumbled, but I could see that he didn't believe it. Something was being hidden there, and as always, the truth could be the key to our survival. An ordinary hunter would have given up at that point, but I'm not like that. The mission was clear: to find those responsible for the attack. But something, in the words of one survivor, piqued my curiosity, a foreboding that there was something much more behind this story. If there was a clue that could lead me to the creature, I wouldn't let it escape. It reignited my passion for hunting, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Arriving at the camp, the scene was bleak. The trees were silent, as if something dark had passed by. The tents were torn apart, as if they had been crushed and scattered. The smell of blood hung in the air. I found a man's body, broken, with bite marks and claws. It was the kind of attack I had seen before, but something was strange. His organs were missing, indicating an attack of something completely different, perhaps even something more insidious. Soon I found another body, then another. There were 4 campers, but only 3 bodies. Where was the 4th member? It was then that I heard a faint voice coming from behind a tree. A woman, visibly frightened, with torn clothes and dirty hair, appeared. Her eyes were filled with fear, but there was something genuinely human about her that touched me. She was alive, but how? How could anyone have survived such a brutal attack? It was clear that she had more to tell. She told me that when the attack happened, she was standing by the campfire, trying to keep the group's morale up. The monsters arrived without warning, and most of the campers were taken by surprise. She hid, trying to remain silent, as terror raged around her. It was then that he saw the thing. A gigantic creature with a horrible appearance. She couldn't describe it completely, but she knew it was anything but normal. The feeling of being watched has never left her since. We talked for a while, trying to understand what happened, but I could only realize how deeply traumatized she was. The young woman told me that what attacked the camp was not a Wendigo, but something stranger, something she called the Dark One. According to her, this creature possessed powers beyond human comprehension, moved like a predator, hunting not out of necessity, but for pleasure. He was not a Wendigo. Something darker and more immortal was behind them, and I began to realize that this was beyond anything we had imagined. Something told me that her story was not a fabrication, and something much worse awaited us in the forest. As we talked, I heard heavy footsteps approaching. The dead silence of the environment was broken by the sound of the leaves being crushed. In a second, the place was completely silent again, as if nothing had happened. I looked at Isabella, and a chill ran down my spine. She was just as nervous as I was. Something was about to happen. Before I could act, a low, guttural roar came from deep in the forest. The creature was approaching rapidly. I ran to my backpack, grabbed my crossbow, and prepared myself for whatever was going to happen. She told me that when the attack happened, she was near a campfire, trying to keep morale high for the group. But the monsters arrived without warning. Most of the campers were taken by surprise, with no chance to fight. She was hiding, trying to keep as quiet as possible, as terror raged around her. That's when she saw the thing, a gigantic creature with a horrible appearance. She couldn't describe it exactly, but she knew that something far beyond the ordinary was there, and the feeling of being watched has never left her since. I talked to her for a while, trying to understand more about what had happened, but the only thing I could tell was that she was deeply traumatized. The young woman explained to me that what attacked the camp was not a Wendigo, but something much stranger, something she called the Dark One. A creature that, according to her story, possessed powers beyond human comprehension. She said that the Dark One moved like a predator, hunting not just out of necessity, but for pleasure. This was not a Wendigo. Something darker and more immortal was behind them, and I was beginning to realize that this was far beyond what we had imagined. Something told me that her story was far from being a fabrication, and something even more terrible awaited us in that wood. As we talked, I could hear heavy footsteps approaching. The dead silence of the environment, where even the trees seemed to sigh, was broken by the sound of leaves being crushed. In a second, the place was completely silent again, as if nothing had happened. It was as if nature itself was being manipulated by the presence of this creature. I looked at Isabella and felt a chill down my spine. She was just as nervous as I was, and it told me that something was about to happen. Before he could act, a low, guttural roar came from deep in the forest. The creature was approaching rapidly, and with it, a sense of pure terror. There was no time to lose. I ran to my backpack, grabbed my crossbow, and prepared myself for whatever was going to happen. The sound of heavy paws slamming against the icy floor and dry leaves became more intense. A huge shadow formed among the trees. It was fast, much faster than any human being could imagine. I knew that this being was not there to play. He was not there to kill, but to destroy, to consume. When the monster appeared, the surrounding air seemed to compress. Its red eyes glowed in the darkness, and its immense size made the terrain tremble. For a moment, I was paralyzed, as if fear itself had gripped me. The monster before me had the appearance of a wolf, but its size was something not seen even in nightmares. Her red eyes glowed in the dark, and her skin seemed almost transparent, as if it was made of an unknown material. Every muscle in his body was in evidence, and his open, sharp-toothed mouth showed just how lethal he could be. The monster was not just an animal. It was a manifestation of what humans fear deep in their hearts. "Isabella, stay behind me," I murmured. She looked tense, but the survival instinct kept her silent, ready for whatever was needed. We didn't have much time. The only thing I knew was that we couldn't let that creature catch us. I needed to think fast. The beast I had was strong, but this monster seemed unbreakable. The Hulet advanced with a speed that seemed impossible for something of that size. As he launched himself towards me, the air around him seemed to compress, and the impending impact made the ground shake. I moved quickly, throwing my body to the side, but the proximity of the attack made the ground tremble. Their paws, gigantic and sharp, scratched the earth as if ready to tear anything in their path, including me. My goal was simple: to get out alive and take Isabella out of that hell. The monster, however, seemed to like the idea of seeing me fighting for my life. He was having fun with it, and that, my friends, is the very essence of fear. It's not the monster itself, but the pleasure it takes from its prey, the feeling that you're not fighting for survival, but being part of a macabre game. There was the monster, next to the ring of fire I had created to protect myself. But this wolf didn't seem to care about that. He moved with supernatural speed, going through the fire without a flame even touching him. How was this possible? The Wendigos, the Skinwalkers, and every creature I've ever faced were weak against fire. But this wolf wasn't just any creature. He didn't feel threatened. I quickly realized that to defeat this monster, I would need more than just weapons and strength. He needed something that wasn't physical, something that could stop this creature that seemed to be beyond human comprehension. The secret lay in something I'd known for a long time, but now seemed more relevant than ever: the mind. While I was there trying to stay calm, Isabella spoke. "I know what to do." I looked at her, surprised. She looked different now, stronger, more decisive. "Listen," she said firmly, "I heard my grandfather talk about something like that, a wolf called the Hulet. He is immortal, but not invincible. There is a weakness, a specific point that can be reached, but no one has ever survived long enough to document how to kill." I was in shock. How did she know that? Had she prepared for this moment, or was this pure luck? It didn't matter. The only thing that mattered now was to use this information to try to get out alive. "What is his weakness?" I asked quickly. "At the base of the neck, where the bones meet. If you hit there, it will lose the ability to move. It's a chance, but it's the only one we have. Now, with a new purpose, I decided to do the unthinkable. I grabbed my pistol, the only gun left with silver bullets, and with all the focus I had, I aimed for the creature's neck. With a quick, calculated movement, I squeezed the trigger. The bullet flew towards the monster's weak point. The impact was immediate. The wolf let out an agonizing cry that echoed through the forest, making all the beings around it fall silent. He staggered, trying to stay on his feet, but the wound was fatal. Finally, the monster fell, and silence took over the room. "Isabella," and I stood there, watching the monster's body disintegrate under the light of the full moon. We had won, but not without great cost. What had started as a routine mission turned into a fight for survival, and in the end, we made it out alive. Now, before I continue, I want to ask you something different. We know stories like this aren't easy to forget, and I bet many of you have experienced something that marked you. How about leaving in the comments what you think of our story so far? Share your own experiences and tell me what you learned from what we experienced. Oh, and if you haven't signed up yet, take the opportunity now to be part of this unique community. I look forward to hearing what you guys think and hope that our journey will bring something new to all of us. Dawn began to dawn on the horizon, painting the sky with golden and pink tones. However, the feeling that something was still wrong hung in the air. The two of us, Isabella and I, walked away from the battlefield, but the flowering that was once peaceful now seemed dead. The wind, instead of refreshing, was cold and biting. I knew that there was still more behind all that, more than a simple monster or an ordinary mission. "Are you okay?" I asked Isabella as we walked along the trail, trying to keep our attention on the path ahead, but at the same time observing our surroundings with extra attention. Her expression was calmer now, but the blank stare she had before the fight was more distant. She didn't respond immediately, which made me feel a twinge of concern. I don't know. I survived, but I don't know how much longer. I'm trying to understand all this, not only what happened in the camp, but what happened to the people there. They were not prepared, and I just wanted to go home, she replied, her voice trembling. It wasn't the answer I expected, but it wasn't the surprise that I was free this time either. Isabella was strong, but this kind of experience changes a person. She seemed to still be trying to cope with reality. A while ago, she asked me if I felt the weight of what I was doing, and I said yes. Each hunt had its price, and what is lost along the way cannot be recovered. I knew that. But she was new to this world. What happened to her at every moment was something I had experienced myself in my early years, but the difference was that I was much more hardened. Each hunt made me more distant from who I once was. She was still in the beginning. We followed the trail, but the forest didn't seem as quiet as before. The presence of something else could not be ignored. Each step felt heavy. I looked at Isabella, and I could see that she was still processing everything. At each interval, she looked around more closely, as if expecting something to emerge from the shadows at any moment. Then, the breeze of the wind became stronger and colder. Something was wrong. I felt the movement in the vegetation, the sensation of being watched. It wasn't the wind. It was not the sound of time or nature. He was a presence, an energy that was infiltrated in the forest. Something far more dangerous than any other monster. Suddenly the answer came from where we least expected it. The sound was unnatural. He was coming from the tree above us, a low hiss almost imperceptible but growing, as if something had shifted. Immediately, I pulled Isabella to the ground in order to protect both of us. Time seemed to drag on as I prepared for what was to come, but in fact, I wasn't ready for what appeared. From the top of the tree, a strange creature descended. His form was that of a man, but his body was shrouded in shadows. His face, distorted and expressionless, reflected the deepest fear, as if it were a being that fed on its own anguish. His eyes, black as darkness, were the only living spots in the creature. He approached us quickly, his movements silent, almost ethereal. The shadows that surrounded him seemed to dance around him, as if they were constantly moving. No, he shouldn't have followed me. The voice of the being was not human. It was more of a whisper in my mind, a pressure inside my head that made me feel like he wasn't speaking directly, but still hit me hard. The fear that emanated from him was palpable. And once again, Isabella came closer to me, grabbing my arm tightly. She seemed to realize what I was seeing, but she was just as paralyzed as I was. The being continued in a darker tone. "You don't know what you did. Now, they will have to pay for it." I knew that wasn't good. It was something I wasn't prepared to face. The normal monsters, the Wendigos, Skinwalkers, those I knew. But that was different. I didn't know if I was dealing with a spiritual manifestation, a being from another dimension, or an ancient creature that humanity had forgotten. The only thing I knew was that he wasn't the type you could just kill with a knife or a silver bullet. "Isabella, run!" I shouted, not with fear, but with the instinct of a hunter trying to preserve the only survivor who accompanied me. She hesitated, but soon launched herself forward, running as fast as she could, while I stayed behind. The creature didn't seem to move immediately, but its presence was still there, like a shadow that continued to haunt the environment. I pulled out the rest of my gear quickly. The beast wouldn't be of any use against something like that, so I went back to what I knew: fire. I lit a torch and, fire in hand, walked towards the creature without hesitation, knowing that it was the only thing that could help me at that moment. When the torch came into contact with the creature's shadow, there was a scream. It was not a physical pain, but a sound that cut through the mind. He couldn't stand the fire, like the other monsters. But as the creature retreated, another sound appeared, stronger now. It was close. The wind brought with it a deep growl, coming from a much larger place. The real threat was not only there, with that dark being, but something even more horrible was approaching. My heart raced, and the only thing I could do was look at the direction in which Isabella had fled. She was standing there, looking at what was coming. It was a wolf, but not an ordinary wolf. It was the same one, the monstrous one we faced before. Hulet, the immortal wolf, was back, stronger than before, and he was not alone. Beside him, other beings approached, creatures that did not belong to this world. The battle was just beginning. The wolf, the Hulet, was slowly advancing towards us, his eyes as red as fire, burning everything they touched. Every step he took made the ground shake slightly, as if nature itself was being forced to give way under the weight of his presence. I knew this was not going to be an easy match. Something about that creature was beyond what any experienced hunter like me had ever faced. It was almost as if the wolf knew exactly how to hunt us, how to manipulate us, becoming an extremely intelligent and ruthless predator. Isabella, who had previously seemed astonished, now prepared herself for whatever was necessary. She knew there was no turning back. We had to fight. "We're not going to let him win," she said, with a firmness in her voice that I didn't expect. She was determined, and that gave me the strength to act. I wasn't fighting alone. There, at that moment, we were a team. I had no time to waste. The first thing I did was look around, looking for something that could be used to our advantage. I saw some large, fallen stones around, and knew that if I could use them, I could distract the creature for a moment. We needed time, and every second we gained could be the difference between living or dying. Adrenaline rushed through my veins. As my mind strategized, the Hulet was fast approaching. He did not move instinctively, but in a calculated way, as if he had a plan in mind. He knew that it was not just brute force that would defeat us, but our lack of preparation or understanding of its nature. This wolf was not just there to kill us. He was studying us, watching our every move, waiting for the right moment to strike. Lifted one of the stones with calloused hands, still feeling the weight of accumulated fatigue from previous battles, but showing no weakness. Mira wasn't my top priority. What I wanted was just to scare the creature and create an opening. Throwing the stone toward a nearby tree, I could see the Hulet turn around, his attention momentarily diverted. That gave me the chance I needed. I quickly grabbed the crossbow and charged a silver arrow, aiming at the most vulnerable point of its structure, the neck. If I could hit the right place, I could seriously injure him. The arrow cut through the air quickly, but surprisingly, the Hulet did something I didn't expect. He leaned to the side with unearthly speed, dodging the arrow with a dexterity that was no ordinary animal. This only added to the feeling that we were dealing with something much older and more powerful than a simple creature. He wasn't just defending himself, he was playing the game of hunter against us. "It's not enough," I muttered to myself. I knew that the arrow had not reached the fatal point, but he was not willing to give up. The only thing I knew was that we had a chance. I needed to outsmart him, and to do that, I would have to start thinking outside the box. That's when I remembered those words Isabella had told me about Hulet's weakness. The point of the neck, where the bones meet. This detail could be our key to survival. I needed to take advantage of that, and I wasn't going to do it alone. I looked at her and shouted, "Isabella, if you can, go from behind. Try to hit that spot. On his neck. I'm going to distract you." She didn't hesitate. I knew we had no more time. With a nimble movement, she rushed in, positioning herself behind a large log that was to the left of the Hulet. I was silent, waiting for my distraction. I knew what she was trying to do, reach the creature without being seen, and then strike with the silver arrow directly at the weak point she had learned. Hulet, on the other hand, didn't seem to be so interested in me anymore. He knew we were now a duo. He changed his focus to Isabella. His gaze, fixed in her direction, showed an even more dangerous intelligence. "You can't kill us, you can't," I thought to myself, feeling the pressure mount. I then prepared my next move. In one swift motion, I approached him with a swift leap, trying to get him to turn toward me. I was on the edge now. I felt the weight of the struggle, the tension of knowing that any mistake could mean death for both of us. When the Hulet turned, it made an unexpected movement, a burst of force that hit me head-on, throwing me backwards against a tree. The impact was brutal, and for a moment, I was dizzy. But I knew I needed to recover quickly. I was wounded, but not defeated. Before the monster could move forward, I heard a familiar sound, the silver arrow cutting through the air. With a desperate scream, Isabella hit her target. The arrow hit the exact spot it needed, and the Hulet came to an abrupt stop. He howled in indescribable pain, his huge form shaking violently as the poison of the silver began to take effect. I saw the creature tremble and take a few steps back, as if its strength was slipping away. The creature was still alive, but its resistance was breaking down. A last scream echoed through the forest, a sound of despair, and Hulet's shadow began to fade, as if he were returning to a place beyond our world. I didn't know if he was really dying or just retreating, but I knew that this moment had been our only chance. When the last trace of the wolf disappeared, we walked away, still with our hearts racing, carefully observing the place. We were exhausted, but we knew that the fight was not over. Hulet may have retreated, but there was something else at stake, something we couldn't fully understand yet. And as we walked back, I knew that the real hunt had only just begun. Now I would like to hear your opinions once again. What do you think is coming? How do you think we should face what is coming? Leave your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to share this video with friends who like stories full of mystery and adventure. If you haven't signed up yet, take advantage now so you don't miss any part of this journey. The path to the camp was quieter than I would have liked. The tension still hung in the air, and the weight of what we had just faced had not yet dissipated. The trees around us were withered, as if absorbing the energy of the fight, making everything darker. The fight with Hulet was just a reflection of what was to come, but we knew we had won an important battle. The creature had retreated, but that didn't mean we were free from danger. Something was still watching us. I looked at Isabella, who was walking beside me, her eyes fixed on the path ahead, as if she was trying to process everything that happened. She was different now, stronger, but still vulnerable, like any human being after living such a nightmare. But what impressed me most was the way she had surpassed herself. He had not allowed himself to be discouraged by the pressure of the situation. She had a survival instinct that I would never underestimate. "What do you think that thing was?" she asked, breaking the silence with a question that had been on my mind for some time. I didn't have a definitive answer. "Something other than a monster," I replied, trying to articulate my thoughts. It wasn't just his physical strength. It was as if he knew what we were thinking, as if he was manipulating our perception of everything. He was smarter than any animal I've ever faced. "Do you think that was he sent by someone?" Isabella asked in a more cautious, almost fearful tone. I didn't want to scare her anymore, but the truth was, in a way, I also wondered if this creature had any purpose. I knew enough about these entities to know that they weren't just random beings. Perhaps the Hulet was a manifestation of something bigger, something that was trying to teach us a dark lesson. I don't know what it is, but what I do know is that we can't let our guard down. We are dealing with something that is not limited to a simple hunt. This could be just the beginning of something much bigger, something we are about to face, with forces we can't even imagine. As we went, the sound of the wind cut through the silence of the forest. I looked at the surrounding trees, watching the shadows that danced and stretched as the sunlight fell. The forest was alive in a strange way, as if it knew what had happened, as if the balance between the natural and supernatural worlds was at risk. "Let's go to the camp. There we can plan the next step," I suggested, trying to stay calm. "But be ready, this is not over yet." Isabella nodded, and together we continued on the way. I knew that when we got there, the answers we were looking for would not be as simple as we imagined. What we had found so far was just the surface of something much bigger. When we arrived at the camp, the scene was even more bleak. The tents were completely destroyed, and the smell of death was poignant in the air. But what caught my attention the most was something I hadn't noticed before. There were marks on the ground, large footprints, unlike any animal I had ever seen. They were deep, as if the creature was walking with a much greater weight than normal. Something much more immense than the Hulet or any other beast I had ever hunted. Isabella noticed the marks too. "What do you think these footprints are?" she asked, her tone more serious than ever. "I don't know," I said, bending down to inspect the footprints. "But if there's something bigger here, then we need to find out what it is before it finds us." It was then that I heard something, a distant sound like a bang. Something was approaching, something big, very big. The earth shook slightly, and I knew we were not alone. The monster, or monsters, we were hunting were still moving. We didn't know what awaited us, but we knew that the fight was far from over. "I think it's time for us to make our last move," I said, my mind racing as I tried to plan our next move. Isabella approached me, her gaze determined. "What do we need to do?" "We need to get out of here and find out where these creatures come from, and if necessary, face them once and for all. What we have to do now is understand what we are facing and how to defeat them." She took a deep breath. "So, let's do it. We're in this together." The walk back to the point where the footprints intensified was tense, the sound of the wind biting and the distant noises of the creatures accompanying us. I could feel the weight of what we were about to face. Whatever was behind these creatures was in motion, and it was going after us. Finally, we arrived at a place where the footprints were more visible. They were deep, with wide, heavy markings, and stretched in a straight line for several meters. The ground was marked with the weight of something monstrous, a force that seemed to be increasing as we went, and then I saw it. Something big, something gigantic moving through the forest, a huge, dark and imposing body. He was like a shadow that took over the entire forest, more than any being I had ever seen. He stopped in front of us, his eyes shining with an intensity that seemed to pierce our soul. Whatever it was there to hunt us. I knew that the real hunt had begun now. We were about to face something as old as the earth itself, something that should no longer exist. But he was there, and we had no choice but to confront him. The creature in front of us did not move. It was as if the forest was standing still, frozen in time. The air became dense, heavy, as if the world itself was trying to hide from that being, from that immense presence. The figure before us was a mixture of shadow and flesh, with something almost ethereal in its composition, as if it were half creature, half manifestation of human fear. I could feel my breathing getting heavier, but it wasn't the fatigue. It was fear. The kind of primal fear you feel when you're faced with something you can't understand. Something so big, so old, that the very idea of facing it seemed unthinkable. Isabella remained by my side, her eyes fixed on the creature. His posture was tense, but I could see the determination in his eyes. She was prepared for whatever would come, even if it was the last battle of our lives. The creature in turn did something strange. His huge head tilted slightly to the side, as if studying us, analyzing us. There was no hurry. He knew that time was on his side. The giant being in front of us had incomparable strength, but it also possessed a disconcerting calm. He knew that at some point we would make a move, and he would be ready to devour us. I knew we needed to act, but somehow the mere fact of being there, so close to that thing, made my legs tremble. It wasn't a wolf like Hulet. It wasn't just any beast. This creature seemed to be something that transcended human understanding, something from the very fabric of fear, from ancient legends. "It's waiting for us to attack," Isabella said, breaking the silence, her voice firm but with a note of apprehension. "We must move now." I didn't know what to do, but one thing occurred to me. We needed to destabilize this monster, distract it, until we found a weakness, something we could use. I quickly looked around for anything we could use to our advantage. The tree trunks were down, but what really caught my attention was the sound. Something was moving in the shadows to our right. It was a distraction, a chance, an opportunity. "Isabella, let's go. Stay behind me," I shouted. "Enjoy the distraction." She didn't hesitate. Unlike me, who had faced several of these creatures, she knew she didn't have time to think too much. It was act or die. We ran to the left, towards the sound, while the monster, with its eyes shining, turned its huge head in our direction. His jaw slowly opened, and I knew he was preparing to attack. But the movement to our right was enough to grab his attention for a brief second. It was the moment we needed. With a swift movement, I reached what appeared to be a wooden spear that was among the remains of a fallen tree. It wasn't big, but it was sturdy. It wasn't exactly a weapon, but if used correctly, it could be lethal. The creature advanced with supernatural speed, but before it could reach us, Isabella stepped forward and threw a stone that was in her hands, causing it to hit the monster in the shoulder. He growled, but the movement was enough to give me time to move forward with the spear. With a scream of strength, I threw the spear toward the most vulnerable spot I could identify, the base of the neck, where the muscles connected with the spine. I wasn't sure it would be enough, but the impact was sure. The creature faltered for a moment, letting out a guttural howl that made the surrounding trees tremble. It was enough for both of us to take a leap back, running as fast as possible. But as I looked back, I realized something was wrong. The creature wasn't retreating. She was just recovering, as if the blow had done nothing. His skin seemed to regenerate, and his energies were renewed. It was almost as if no matter what we did, she would always come back stronger. "This isn't going to be easy, is it?" said Isabella, with a tired look on her face, but still with the determination I'd seen in other hunters, those who don't surrender. I knew we needed to be smarter, faster. "We need to keep attacking until something works," he said, trying to stay focused. The monster, now more furious, rose with a force that made the ground shake. He was back, more menacing than ever. But this time, unlike before, it seemed that he was understanding the battle, as if he was learning from our every move. "This is the moment," I thought. "We have to end this now before he fully recovers." And that's when the idea came up. We knew that the creature was adapting to our actions, but we also knew that it couldn't move as freely while we were surrounded by trees and rocks. The only way was to force her into a direct confrontation where she had nowhere to run. "Isabella, use fire," I said, my mind lighting up with an improvised solution. She looked at me, understanding the need for the plan. Quickly, he began to look for anything that could set on fire. I, meanwhile, prepared myself for the final fight. We knew that this battle would be the hardest of all, and we had no choice but to give it our all. The monster was approaching quickly, and time seemed to be running out. Isabella's fire began to grow, an intense flame that lit up the forest like a lighthouse. It was now or never. As the monster charged, it went into the line of fire, and the final battle began. I knew that if he wasn't defeated there, we would be consumed by him. The creature charged forward with almost supernatural speed, its footsteps reverberating like thunder through the forest. She was approaching the line of fire that Isabella had created. The light of the flames illuminated her dark skin and somehow seemed to burn her. But she did not back down. His outsized body approached with merciless determination, as if he knew exactly what he wanted. She knew that she could not be easily defeated, and the mere fact that she was there, in front of us, made the earth tremble with fear. I felt the pressure increase with each step of the creature. He knew that not only our survival was at stake, but something bigger, something that was beyond our comprehension, and yet we couldn't run away, not now. We knew that if we retreated, this creature would hunt us to the last of us without mercy. The only possible way was to face it head-on. Without hesitation, "Isabella, don't stop, keep the fire strong," I shouted, my voice charged with urgency. She was by my side, trying to keep the flame alive. The surrounding trees were starting to catch fire, and smoke was rising into the sky, further obscuring the environment. But for the monster, that didn't seem to be enough. He crossed the line of fire with impressive ease, his steps never wavering, as if the fire was nothing more than a mere distraction. That's when I realized something was going on. The fire wasn't stopping him, but it was making him angrier. His eyes, once almost mesmerizing, were now dominated by blind rage, and he kept moving forward. I knew I had to think of something new, something that could finally put an end to that nightmare. With a swift movement, I drew my pistol and aimed at the monster. The silver bullets might not be enough, but maybe if it managed to hit some vital point, we could at least weaken it. I concentrated for a second, aiming at his throat. The shot was quick, and the sound of the bullet cutting through the air was followed by a pained scream from the creature. She stepped back briefly, and that gave us a brief moment of relief. But soon she returned, more furious than ever. His skin seemed to heal quickly, and I realized that I couldn't rely on conventional weapons alone. The venom of the silver bullets was acting slowly, but the monster was still immense and strong. We needed something more. Isabella, with her eyes fixed on the creature, was desperate to help. "What else can we do? He will not stop." I looked at her, trying to find some answer, and it was then that an idea occurred to me. We have to get him out of his territory. He is strong here, where the terrain is his ally. But if we can get him to a more vulnerable place, we may have a chance. She looked at me with a confused expression. How are we going to do that? Wasting no time, I started running towards the nearby river. It was the only option. I knew that. The creature, as powerful as it was, did not have the same control over water as it had over the land. If we could get her to follow us there, we could use the environment to our advantage. When I reached the riverbank, I took a quick look behind me. The creature was closer, its steps fast and furious. "Now, Isabella, let's go!" I shouted, doing my best to lure the creature into the more difficult terrain. The sound of the rushing water seemed to attract the monster, which was now completely fixated on its prey, like an unbeatable predator that didn't know it was entering its own trap. The creature followed us without hesitation. When she finally approached the shore, I saw the decisive moment. The terrain became more slippery, and the monster hesitated for a brief second. That was all we needed. "Isabella, run to the other side, now!" I knew that if we could lure the creature into the water, it would lose some of its advantage. She did as I asked, running across the river while I continued the distraction. The monster, now enraged and not realizing that it was approaching the river, lunged to attack me. However, the slippery ground caused him to lose his balance, and before he could react, he slipped into the water. The sound of the creature falling into the water was deafening, and for a moment, the great beast seemed stunned. But the problem was not solved. I knew that wasn't enough. The monster was still going strong, and its adaptation was impressive. "Isabella, quick! We have to attack him while he's out of control." I knew that this was our only chance of victory. She didn't hesitate. He ran to me, picking up the beast I had left behind. Together, we created a line of defense, prepared for whatever was needed. We knew that any mistake now would mean death. With a last roar of pain and rage, the monster stood, but the water seemed to have weakened it. The advantage was in our favor, but there was still a lot of risk. Isabella aimed accurately and with a quick movement fired a silver arrow directly at the monster's vulnerable spot. The impact was immediate, and the creature let out a horrible scream, its strength beginning to give way. The silver arrow had struck exactly where the vital part of it was, and the monster faltered. Then, with a last-ditch effort of resistance, he collapsed, finally succumbing to the poison. Its large form fell to the side, the water beginning to swallow the creature, and silence took over the room. We both stood there, panting, staring at the fallen creature. The battle was over, but the cost had been great. Even with the victory, something still weighed in the air. What did all this mean? What was this creature? And what else was there in that forest that we had not yet faced? The silence after the battle seemed deafening. The creature had finally fallen, but its death did not seem to bring relief. Instead, a growing sense of unease washed over us, as if the end of one fight only marked the beginning of another, even more frightening one. The river, which had once seemed to us a way to escape the creature, now seemed to drag slowly, as if carrying with it the shadows of the forest, a living memory of all that had happened. I can't believe we did it," Isabella said, her voice low, almost breathless, as she slowly walked away from the riverbank. His expression was tired, but there was something more in his eyes. A change, a sudden maturity that I knew came from the experiences we lived, from the terrors we faced together. She was no longer the same person I had met just a few hours ago. Something inside her had changed forever. "It's hard to believe, but it's the reality now," I replied, watching the creature lying in the dark waters. "But the fact that we won this does not mean that it is all over. This battle was just a piece of what's to come." She looked at me, and for the first time, something that looked like a faint smile appeared on her lips. "Are you still so skeptical? Even after all this?" "I'm not skeptical," I replied. "I'm just a realist. There's something bigger going on here, something we're just beginning to understand." She nodded, agreeing with my analysis. "I think you're right. I can't deny what we saw. Something else is coming. This isn't just about hunting these creatures. It's about understanding what they represent." For a moment we were silent, watching the still water. But I knew we couldn't stay there for long. The forest around us was still full of mysteries, and although we had defeated the immediate threat, the risk of more beings like that appearing was real. I felt it on my skin. "We need to go back to the camp and reorganize," he said, breaking his silence. "But we also need to understand what we are facing. It's not just normal hunting. Something much bigger is behind all of this." Isabella looked at me, her eyes reflecting the same restlessness. "Do you really think there's more like this around here, or was that just an accident?" "No," he said firmly. "This was planned. They're here for a reason, and I will not rest until I understand what that reason is." We decided to return to the camp, where we could better assess the situation. The journey was far from over. When we arrived, we were faced with the desolate scenario. The tents, which had been full of life for a short time, now seemed to be a reflection of what we had faced, destroyed, crushed, without any trace of those who inhabited them. The smell of blood was still in the air, a vivid reminder that death had passed by. As we started to organize our things, I found something interesting on the floor. It was a torn piece of cloth, covered in blood. Upon closer looking, I realized that it was unlike anything I had ever seen before. The material looked old, but at the same time, it was not something common. He exuded a sense of power, as if he had been imbued with some kind of strange energy. "This doesn't look like someone who was camping for fun," Isabella said, upon seeing the fabric. "This was left here by someone who knew exactly what was going on." I lifted the piece of fabric cautiously, feeling the energy it emanated. It was not just an ordinary piece of clothing. It was as if it had been used by someone who understood what was going on in this place. And that got me thinking. Who was behind all this? Who was moving the pieces in this hunting game? "This isn't just the work of creatures like that Hulet," I said, still holding the piece of cloth. "We have to find the origin of this, and for that, we need to go beyond hunting. We need to understand what is happening in this place. Something much bigger is at stake." Isabella looked at me with a serious expression, more focused than ever. "And what do we need to do to figure that out?" I took a deep breath, looking at the ruins of the camp and the gloomy forest in front of us. "We will follow the trail. Every clue we find leads us to something bigger. But we need to be ready for what we can find. Nothing will be as it seems." "That's it, Isabella. It's just the beginning." As I looked out into the forest, I knew we were at the center of something far more complex than a simple monster hunt. There were forces at work, something that was beyond our comprehension, and we were just pieces in this puzzle. Whatever was behind all of this had a reason to be there, and we had to figure out what. But as we prepared to move on, the atmosphere around us began to change. The wind picked up, and the sky, which had once seemed clear, was now covered by heavy clouds. As if the world itself was trying to warn us that we were going down a dangerous path. Something was approaching, but we didn't know exactly what, and it was at that moment that the sound of something breaking the trees to our left made us stop. Something was coming our way, something very big. Whatever it was not just any creature, it was more than that. The sound coming from the trees to our left was no ordinary noise. It wasn't just the sound of the wind or the movement of animals in the forest. It was heavy, like the sound of something big breaking branches and trees. The ground beneath our feet seemed to shake slightly, and a sense of discomfort washed over me. Something was approaching, and it wasn't good. "Isabella, stay behind me," I said, pulling my crossbow forward as I watched the direction of the sound. Each step seemed to increase, heavier, more determined. Something big was coming, something I knew would not be easy to face. She positioned herself behind me, her face tense, but without hesitation. She knew the fight wasn't over, and the realization of that was what made her so strong. She was no longer a rookie, but a hunter, someone who had been molded by adversity, ready to face whatever was necessary. The sound grew louder, and soon something revealed itself among the trees. First, it was a dark shape that moved between the trunks of the trees, approaching us with astonishing speed. I prepared to attack, but when the creature finally revealed itself in full, something made me hesitate. It was huge, so great that its presence seemed to engulf the surrounding forest. His eyes shone with an otherworldly intensity, red as fire, and the shape was unmistakable. It was a being that mixed human and beast in a grotesque way, with muscles that seemed to almost overload its skin. Its sharp, huge claws, which dragged along the ground, made the sound of tearing metal as he advanced. "That's not possible," I muttered to myself. The monster before us was no ordinary creature. It was an aberration, something that should not exist. "Be careful!" shouted Isabella, alerting me as the creature advanced even faster. I knew we couldn't beat him easily. Not now. This creature had something other than brute strength. It was a primal force, something that was beyond any monster we had ever faced. But what bothered me most was not his appearance or his strength. It was the fact that he looked familiar. Something in the way he moved, in the way his eyes lit up, told me that we had faced something like him before, but never like this. Never so big. I squeezed the crossbow, the tension building. The monster was almost on top of us, and I knew I had no more time. "Get ready," he said to Isabella, already aiming at the beast, at the creature. "We have no choice but to fight." She prepared herself next to me, grabbing her pistol, and with a scream, the creature launched itself towards us. The impact was so strong that the moment he attacked us, I almost felt as if the ground itself was giving way under our feet. The air around it seemed saturated with energy, as if every piece of land was being corrupted by the presence of this thing. I was aware that our only chance of survival was to weaken the creature enough that it lost control. I shot my crossbow, and the silver arrow sliced through the air, heading directly toward the creature. But to my surprise, she turned with a speed that seemed impossible, dodging the arrow with an almost supernatural movement. The beast I had used considerable strength, but that wasn't enough to stop it. "It's not enough," I grumbled. "We have to find another way to stop him." The creature advanced with terrifying rapidity, and every step it took seemed to make the surrounding forest tremble. I knew that with a being of this size and strength, we wouldn't have much time to act. Isabella was by my side, her gaze determined, and I knew that together we could find a way to defeat him. But it would not be easy. It would never be easy. "He can't just be a beast," Isabella said, her eyes fixed on the monster that was advancing towards us. "This type of creature has a purpose. Maybe we can use it against him." It was a bold idea, but maybe it was our only chance. I knew Isabella was trying to think beyond brute force, trying to understand what this monster really was. "Maybe you're right," I said, already trying to formulate a strategy. "If we can understand what he wants, maybe we can use it against him." The creature was almost on top of us, and I knew we had no more time. With one swift movement, I used what little was left of my energy to run toward a nearby rock, trying to grab a more advantageous position. The monster, seeing my movement, followed me, but in a strange way, seemed to hesitate for an instant. It was the time we needed. Isabella, with a look of pure determination, jumped forward, going to the other side of the creature, using a stone as support to get closer. The creature, confused by the change in dynamics, no longer knew where to focus its strength. I saw that she was making the right move, trying to distract the monster while I prepared the next attack. With my heart pounding, I aimed once again, but this time I knew that it wasn't just the power of weapons that would save us. It was our brain, the way we work together, how we adjust our strategies. I knew I had to act fast. When the creature finally turned towards me with a terrible roar, I launched the arrow with all the force I could muster. It cut through the air, hitting the exact spot on the creature's neck. The impact was profound. The beast stopped at the same moment, its body shaking violently, and for a second, the world around us fell silent. But the fight is not over. I knew she was still going strong, still alive. It wouldn't be easy to defeat her, but now, finally, we had a chance. "Isabella! Now!" I shouted. She quickly approached, grabbing a sharp knife from her belt, and with a scream of strength, struck a well-aimed blow at the creature. The silver knife entered his body, and the creature let out a deafening scream, finally falling to the side, its strength draining. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. I looked at Isabella, sweaty and panting, but with a firm look of someone who would not give up. Together, we had won another battle. But there was still much more to be discovered. Whatever was going on there, it wasn't finished. The truth still eluded us. The victory over the creature did not bring relief, as I had hoped. Instead, a strange sense of emptiness settled among us. I looked at Isabella, and she seemed to reflect on the same. The battle, as intense as it was only a prelude. Whatever had brought us there was still in motion, and the fact that we had defeated a monster did not mean that everything was solved. "This is not over, is it?" said Isabella, breaking the silence with a question that had been hovering in my mind for some time. "There is still more to face." I nodded slowly. Yes, this creature was just one piece in the puzzle. Whatever put us here, that's no coincidence, and we still have a lot to discover. As I spoke, I looked at the surrounding forest. The silence was starting to get uncomfortable, the kind of silence that comes after a big storm, where everything seems to be waiting for the next move. Something was watching us, that was for sure. The feeling of being watched did not disappear, as if the trees themselves were stalking us. Isabella took her rifle and positioned herself next to me. "We need to get out of here. We need to go back and find answers." I looked at her and nodded. "I agree, but we need to be quick. We don't know what else might be lurking. The forest is treacherous, and the dangers here are beyond what we imagine." We decided to head towards the camp, still cautious. Each step we took seemed heavier than the last, as if the earth itself was holding us back. I knew that the situation was getting worse, that we could no longer trust anything that seemed to be safe. Whatever was going on there, it was beyond our strength. But the only thing we could do was move on, looking for answers. As we approached the camp, the tension increased. The trees, which had previously been quiet, now seemed denser, more threatening. I knew something was out of place, but I didn't know exactly what. Suddenly, the feeling of being watched increased, becoming almost unbearable. I looked around, but nothing moved. Everything was in a state of stillness, a deadly calm that only heralded more destruction to come. When we arrived at the campsite, a shiver ran down my spine. Something was wrong. The camp was even more destroyed than when we left it. The destruction didn't seem to be just physical, but there was something deeper, darker. The place now seemed charged with an energy that I could not explain. It was as if evil had taken root there. Isabella, who was watching the field, turned to me, her eyes wide. "Look, this is not normal." I followed her gaze and saw what she was observing. In the center of the camp, there was a kind of circle formed by scraps of wood and stones, as if someone had done a kind of ritual. In the center of the circle, a huge rock was covered in ancient runes that shone with a light that didn't seem of this world. The runes seemed to pulsate with a strange energy, and I knew that what was happening there was far greater than any monster I had ever faced, emitting a faint but unmistakable light. A feeling of dread seized me immediately. I knew this wasn't something the campers had done. This was not human. This is a symbol, Isabella said, approaching cautiously. These runes are not from any known language, but I've seen something like this before in old texts that talk about ancient rituals, invocation rituals. Invocation. The word resounded in my mind like a scream. What we are facing, they are not just creatures. There's something bigger, something that's trying to be awakened. Isabella looked at me, now understanding the gravity of the situation. But who's doing it? Who's behind this? I shook my head, trying to process everything we were seeing. I don't know, but that's an opening. Whatever caused all of this, it's trying to open a portal, and that's why the monsters are coming. They are being called. We both sat silent for a moment, taking in the enormity of what lay before us. A sense of urgency washed over me. We couldn't stay there anymore. We needed to get out, find out who was behind all of this, and stop whatever it was from being brought back into our world. But before we could do anything, we heard a sound coming from the trees, distant but growing. It was a familiar sound. It was like the sound of something big moving, something that was hunting us. I turned to look at Isabella, and she was already in position, pistol in her hands, ready for whatever was needed. "Whatever that is, we can't let it reach us," she said, her voice strained. I agreed. We will not let it. But we need to know what we are facing before we act. We need to destroy the portal before it's too late. With that, we started moving quickly. Our only option now was to go towards the source of the sound. Whatever it wasn't far away. And as we got closer, the air seemed to get denser, as if the universe itself was pressing against us. I knew that the final battle was about to take place. The forest around us seemed denser with each step we took. The distant sound of trees being broken increased, and the feeling of being watched was inescapable. I knew something was fast approaching, something that shouldn't be underestimated. The atmosphere around us became heavier, as if the world itself was being distorted by the evil that was about to be unleashed. Isabella and I kept moving forward, always attentive to the movements around us. Every step we took seemed to lead us to an uncertain destination. I felt as if we were entering a territory that did not belong to us, a territory where the laws of nature no longer applied. Whatever was chasing us was not acting according to any known logic. "What's going on here?" Isabella asked, her voice low but full of determination. She was beginning to realize the magnitude of what we were facing. What else could be behind all this? I looked at her, knowing there was no easy answer. "We don't know yet, but whatever it is, we're dealing with something very old, something that was awakened by something bigger than we imagined." And at that moment, the sounds became louder, more intense. It wasn't just the sound of branches breaking or leaves being moved by the wind. It was something much scarier, something much more deliberate. Something was surrounding us. It was as if we were walking towards a trap. Suddenly, we heard a deep roar, followed by a series of heavy footsteps. The monster that was hunting us was closer than ever. We had no more time. We needed to face it now, or it would be too late. "Get ready," I said, pulling out my pistol and positioning myself in front of Isabella. "Whatever it is, we can't let it get us down." She nodded, her expression of determination firmer than ever. She was ready for whatever came her way, no matter how hard it was. We were no longer just hunters. Now we were hunted, and the only thing we could do was fight with everything we had. The steps got closer. The monster was about to emerge, and I knew that whatever it was, it wouldn't be easy to defeat. But at the same time, something inside me told me that we were ready. Not because of weapons or experience, but because together we had faced so much that there was no more fear. There was only the need to survive, to do whatever was necessary to get out of that forest alive. And then, like an explosion, the creature appeared. It was huge, more than any of us could have imagined. Its claws were sharp as blades, and its eyes glowing a menacing red hue fixed directly on us. It was as if it were the manifestation of everything that the forest represented: violence, darkness, and death. He was the embodiment of the nightmare, and his presence made the environment around us distort. I knew this was our last chance. "Isabella, concentrate! Attack on weakness!" She didn't need any more words. He knew exactly what he needed to do. With a swift movement, she began to charge toward the creature, while I positioned myself beside her, ready to support. The monster charged forward with frightening speed, but we were not inexperienced. We knew what we needed to do. The combat began in a brutal way. The creature charged with immense force, its claws cutting through the air with a chilling sound. But Isabella and I were coordinated, responding to the attacks with precision. With each blow, we felt that we were closer to winning it. But even with the pressure, we did not falter. The battle was intense. The monster was getting angrier and angrier, and I could see that it was adapting to our combat style. He knew how to dodge our attacks, as if he had learned our strategies in real time. We were dealing with something that was not just a beast, but an intelligence that knew how to hunt us. But there was something that kept us strong, our ability to fight together. No matter how difficult it was, no matter how strong the creature was, we had something that he didn't have: determination. In a synchronized movement, Isabella and I attacked at the same time, with the speed and precision of experienced hunters. She fired a silver arrow that hit the monster directly into her chest, while I approached with a sharp blade heading towards her neck. The impact was devastating. The creature let out a cry of pain, but its strength didn't seem to fade. She was stronger than we ever imagined, but we were also stronger. We knew that if we didn't defeat that monster now, there would be no more time. The battle was intensifying, and the creature was starting to lose control. Their attacks were more uncontrolled, and that was what we needed to finally end it all. With a scream, Isabella fired another arrow, hitting the creature's weak point, while I, with the last strength I had left, plunged my blade into the monster's neck. He fell backwards, his heavy body shaking the ground as the air around us calmed down. The monster was finally defeated. Breathing heavily, I looked at Isabella. We were exhausted, but the relief that came after the victory was immediate. However, we knew that the battle was not over. Whatever had brought that creature to us, it was still there, waiting. Isabella looked at me, her expression now more focused than ever. "Are we ready for what's next?" I nodded slowly. "We are. But we still don't know what we're really up against. And as much as we have won this battle, the war is just beginning." The altar before us felt like a door between two worlds, a point of convergence between the natural world and the dark forces that had long been forgotten. Everything we had faced so far, every battle, every monster, felt like a preparation for what was to come next. Whatever was being summoned there, it was not something that could be defeated with a simple weapon or a silver arrow. It was something that transcends everything we ever knew, something ancient, perhaps even immortal, that had been awakened by a force far greater than any of us could have imagined. The clearing was silent, and the feeling of being watched, of being in a territory that did not belong to us, only increased. We knew that the altar was the starting point for something much bigger. The forest, with its shadows and distant echoes, was alive with a dark energy that ran through the land, and everything around us seemed to await our next action. Isabella and I approached cautiously, knowing that we could not retreat. Everything we have done so far has brought us to this moment, and there was no way back. Whatever was necessary to do, it would be done there. The real battle was not just against the creatures we had hunted, but against the evil that was trying to be unleashed on the world. When we finally touched the altar, the earth shook. Runes flashed, more intense than ever, and the air around us seemed to distort. I knew that the evil we were trying to confront was about to manifest itself, and there was only one thing to do: fight to the end. At that time, we were not just hunters. We were no longer just men and women trying to survive. We were fighting for something much greater, for truth, for freedom, and for our own humanity. The forest, the creature, the altar, it was all part of a larger game, and we were the pieces forged by fate to prevent this evil from taking over the world. The final battle was about to begin. Whatever came out of that altar, we would face it with everything we had. Because at the end of the day, it wasn't just about surviving. It was about preventing evil from dominating what was left of our world, and we weren't going to let that happen. Together, we would fight until our last breath. The story was not yet over. In fact, she was just getting started. And now, the real fight for survival would begin. Thank you for following this journey so far. If you liked the story, please share your opinions, thoughts, and theories in the comments. What do you think will happen to the protagonists? What is behind all this? Evil? Be sure to subscribe and keep following. The adventure isn't over yet, and what's next could be even more epic. See you next time.